Okay, welcome Divas and Dudes to Powerhouse Bakery. I'm so excited you made it, and I was so excited to hear some of you walked this morning. Are you feeling inspired this month?
Yes.
After all these? Oh, I'm so glad. High five me on that one. Because me too. In fact, I just brought my hubby over to another place to do to sign up for fitness. Closer to my home so that we can get him there and back faster, because we used to go to a place that was a bit of a drive, and doing this research just makes me want to never miss a workout. And so I hope that's inspired you as well. And really what I want us to always use as a takeaway is that this is to inspire and kind of give you a high bar, but just know that we've got to assess, and we've got to really customize to where you are, because any amount of fitness is better than nothing. And so really knowing that, we have these amazing folks that are doing amazing things in their, later stages of life, in their 70s. Just know that there's a lot in between nothing and hitting it out of the park, And so today is our final series on Fitness Fanatics. And so what I wanted to do was talk about our bones. So I'm going to do a quick little review of kind of where we've come. And Mary, I'm sorry, I forgot a towel again, if you saved me on that. So I want you to be able to just kind of remember. I love to always pull in what we were talking about, because it never hurts to emphasize the big bullets again. And I love this slide, so I gave it to you again. And this is what the heart does for us. And I could just go into all the symbolism of the heart, the spiritual strength, the emotional strength, not to mention the physical strength of what the heart does. But 35 million beats in a year. Squeeze a tennis ball, and that's about how hard it takes, the pressure it takes to get the blood throughout the body. Even at rest, your heart works twice as hard as a sprinter. I mean, it just puts it in perspective, right? Your heartbeat is faster when you're a kid, and it slows down when you get older. And why is that? Not that it has less to travel, but because your muscle gets stronger. And even though we're born with a certain number of cardiac cells, the number doesn't change a lot, like maybe the number of myofibrils in your bicep, but the heart muscles do get stronger. And so the stronger the heart muscle means the fewer number of beats it has to perform in a given day. So that's really fun to realize that we can make a difference. The aorta is the size of a garden hose. Any gardeners in here? I know when you look at that and you think, I water my roses, my zucchini, and my toes. Your body has 5.6 liters, that's 6 quarts of blood. So wow, it circulates through the body 3 times every minute. So as we sit here for 60 minutes, our heart is busy, right? 4 times the distance across the US, dango, right? The heart pumps 1 million barrels of blood in an average lifetime. It just, it's enough to fill more than 3 super tankers. So I just love reminding ourselves that that's an amazing muscle that we have total charge of in a lot of ways, but we also forget that it's doing its job in a lot of ways. And so as we go through the Fitness Fanatics, my goal is to help you really appreciate the role we do have in keeping it strong and vibrant and protected. And just as a reminder, we had this beautiful lady, Joan McDonald, that was an average 70-year-old on the left. And she said, I don't want to do this anymore. And she had a great coach. She had an inspiration. And she made a gargantuan difference in her physique, but also the strength of her heart. She now got rid of all of her heart disease. So diet and exercise and a change of heart, spiritually and mentally, and the strength of what we feel we can do each day made such a difference for this lady. And this other one, Wendy Ida, hard to believe that she was raised in a family that told her that big is beautiful. She had really hit rock bottom in her life, in relationships, and so demoralizing, and she said, no, I'm going to do something different, and really did. And it's just so fun to imagine that You know, even if we have a cancer diagnosis, we can decide that we're going to get the most out of every day. I love the fact that she really emphasized the number one thing is to embrace a great attitude. And I feel like I'm speaking to the choir here because I know that everybody in this room has such a can-do attitude, and that's why you can-do, get yourself up and going every morning and show up here to Powerhouse Bakery. So I love it. And even if we don't all look like that, we still are successful every day when we have a great attitude. We'll talk a little bit today about a nutrition plan and what it means to have a strong plan for building strong muscles and building strong bones. And there's a lot of still controversy really over where supplements can fit. And I've mentioned last time, and I still really believe it, that there's more than one way to get your best healthy. It depends on where you've started, and it depends on your coach and what you really believe in, and own that plan. Learn about it, make good decisions as far as why you've chosen the plan you're on, and then you can really do it to its very best. And then consistency and perseverance and intensity always pay off. And I love this one because Wendy's diet is foods that we talk about all the time. So whether we're looking at strengthening our heart or our biceps or our quadriceps or of course our bones, we still see things like chia seeds and whole grains like oats, healthy fats, and even pickles I thought was hilarious. You know, I wouldn't consider pickles a health food, but certainly there's a place in everybody's diet for foods that are kind of fun foods. Yeah. And here this beautiful lady completely transformed her life and her body with going completely vegan. So even though she wears that halo of healthy with a lifestyle, doesn't mean we have to do it full bright, but she decided to go full bright and has really gained not only the health benefits, but also at 72 years old, she started a whole new career. She went from living on the streets and selling drugs and having drug addiction to being a business owner and a millionaire, you know. So again, not all of us are going to have that kind of path to look back on, but I think it's still a true inspiration. So today I really want to look at how do we eat well, train hard, repeat, and really look at how can we build our strong bones one day at a time. And as you'll see, you know, our style doesn't change. Our needs do change a little bit as we progress through the ages. And so when our needs change, our style has to evolve, but it still has those main principles in there. And that is just like we learned from Wendy and Joan, and that is so much about just our general outlook on life. So when we think about the benefits of physical fitness, it's so good you can't ignore it. So I hope if you haven't been inspired yet to up your ante a little bit in the fitness arena up till today, I hope that this one was going to push you off the edge and you're going to go, okay, I'm going to go find a new way to exercise. Because the beautiful part is that you have immediate benefits and you have long-term benefits. The immediate benefits are so great that it's worth doing today, even if we don't know what tomorrow holds. Better sleep, less anxiety, reduced blood pressure. We know so much about the immunity and how having not only that good outlook, but physical fitness and working the muscles and getting fresh oxygen from our nasal passages and our lungs all the way to every capillary from our fingers and toes to fueling our digestion helps to build immunity. And so I love the fact that immediate responses are great. Did anybody do a hike this weekend? Yes. Where'd you go?
It's so hard for me to speak, but off of
It's okay. You hiked. That's all we care about.
I exited I-10 and Dominion.
Oh, Frederick Park.
Yeah.
Frederick Park. I probably would have seen you there because I was there on Saturday.
We were there Saturday.
Oh, girl, I love it. I love it. Good job. And that's a
How
hard.
many miles did you
I did 6.
We did 6 too.
Girl, high five in the air.
Because we got lost.
So she got lost, which is why she did extra miles, which is such a funny story because my husband and I were up there, and I raised my kids there. So I've been hiking in Frederick Park for at least 20 years. And we found, yes, and we came across this darling lady. She was probably in her, I don't know, maybe early 30s, and she too was lost and not at all prepared. She said she'd been there for 2.5 hours and she was desperate to get to the exit. She had on shorts and really slippery shoes and no water. She's like, how do I get out? So we, just chaperoned her in, and she grabbed my hubby's water and threw it down, didn't think twice about who cares about germs because I need water now. But it was so lovely to get to chaperone her. Yes, it was a good day. And then the very next day we did another 9-mile hike. And so, one of the things I love about my hubby is that he loves to get out there and breathe hard and hit the trails. So we had beautiful weather, and he's really feeling the benefits of it, even the next day. Then when we think of long-term benefits, we know that there's so much to it. Oops, I'm sorry. Let me get back there. There's so much to what exercise does for us. And I know you've heard these, but sometimes it helps just to read them again. When we think of long-term activity, especially when you start young and you just find a love for fitness and you never give it up, well, now your risk for cardiovascular disease is greatly reduced. Your risk for type 1 and type 2 diabetes greatly goes down. Your weight is easier to maintain. And I know early in this series we talked about your body type. Remember, we talked about the endomorph and the mesomorph and the ectomorph. Well, no matter what body type you are, physical fitness helps you age better with that body type. So even if you start out as an endomorph and you turn into a pear, right? You can still be a healthy pear. Yes, absolutely. And the other thing I think was interesting too is how it reduces the risk of brain disorders. And that's very close to my heart. I have a wonderful family member that is dealing with that. And thank goodness he loves fitness. And so it's slowed it more than we would have ever expected. And so we're grateful for that. And then we look at cancer prevention. And, there's a few listed up there, like research has pinpointed physical fitness reduces the incidence of bladder and breast and colon and endometrium and esophagus, kidney, lung, and stomach cancers. But let's say that it reduces the risk of all cancers. And so it's really exciting to know that we have some control, even if there's a genetic tendency in our DNA. We can absolutely change how it comes to reality or doesn't. Super cool. So, build and maintain. That's going to be the mantra as we go forward. Now, if we are past the age of 30, we've kind of closed the window on how much we can build, or can we? So that's the big question right now. Can we still build bone after our 50s? Maybe after our hormones have changed. And that's starting to be looked at. Now there's a sweet spot in there because, and you'll see in some of the next discussion points, how much should we exercise to get the most bang for our buck without causing risk. So that's important. But we do know that consistency with diet, with exercise, perhaps supplementation, and maybe even working closely with your practitioner, maybe medicines are going to be a possibility. But always think about what your risk-benefit equation looks like when we're starting to add supplements. Because you first want to exhaust all your possibilities in diet and exercise, because we know that's really the most effective way for the body to react to its environment and get stronger. Because just like our heart muscle, just like our smooth muscle, just like our bicep muscle, bone is a live tissue. So it responds to the demands we place on it, which is why our beautiful friends Joan and Wendy were able to change their bodies in such an amazing way. First and foremost, we don't want to get injured. Second, we want to be consistent and listen to our bodies and fuel our bodies well so that when we have a demand placed on it, we can respond and get stronger. So it's really awesome to know that these foods up here are mainstays in our diet. Whether we're talking about pretty much any lifestyle habit that improves our our ratio of risk and benefit, so risk of getting disease and benefit of getting all the nutrients we need, we want to include more seeds. You know me, I talk about seeds every time, right? I created the Mighty Seed Blend. I talk about pumpkin seeds and sesame seeds and sunflower seeds, and then also experiment with the seed butters. And if you haven't gotten that message home, then this is your last chance. No, I'm just kidding. I'll tell you about it next month too. But finding ways to incorporate it. This morning, as I was thinking about you, I had my Bulgarian yogurt. I put 2 tablespoons of sunflower seeds on it, and I had my my granola over there. That's the Brazilian, so it has chia, hemp hearts, and flax. It has the whole grain, gluten-free oats, and it had wild blueberries and Brazil nuts. And wow, it was so good. And so don't feel like you're stuck in a rut with breakfast foods. Step out of the norm and experiment. What else could we do with beans for breakfast? You could have all kinds of wonderful wraps. A wrap itself could be made from a bean flour. You could fill the wrap with lentils or hummus, or even non-traditional, you could just pull out a can of beans, add a little bit of salsa and put that in there. Add some whole grain, whether it be quinoa or oats or millet. So lots of ways to, again, just think outside the box. When I was doing this research too, I read much about leafy greens, and we know leafy greens are a great source of calcium, just like the beans and the seeds. And we'll talk a little bit about the oxalates and, are we worried about building oxalates in our system in the attempt of trying to get more calcium. So we'll talk on that a little bit too. This picture here is looking at the different types of calcium supplements that are out there. If you do decide to take calcium, the best way to do it is with food and is taking small amounts throughout the day, not just one dose. So we know that bones absolutely require a couple things: calcium and vitamin D, not to mention all the other minerals, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium. And remember, we talked about this a couple of months ago when we were looking at vitamins. You remember vitamin K2? Yes, that's like the star of the show right now, because we're learning that if you take calcium, of course in foods it's not quite the same because vitamin K shows up with all the foods that you're eating for this, but if you're taking a supplement, we're finding that vitamin K2 is really important, because if you're taking a larger amount of calcium, like a supplement, we don't want it to get lodged in our arteries. So the calcification of the soft tissues can cause problems, right? So K2 is really important, just like vitamin D and all these other minerals. So when you're looking to get a supplement, really do your homework. And if you have questions, let me know and I'll help you kind of walk through how to pick one. But in general, you want a small amount at a time. So maybe 250 milligrams in the morning, 250 with lunch, 250 with dinner. And then also knowing that you're going to get vitamin D somewhere, either from your sunlight when you're out hiking or with a supplement. And then also see where your vitamin K2 is if you're not getting plenty of leafy greens. Okay? And then always looking at how to keep your exercise up, because if you take the supplements, but you don't have the external stimulus telling your bones, get stronger, baby, that calcium really will not be utilized. And so that's the key. We want all the nutrients to come in, and then we want the external stimulus, which is exercise, that forces that calcium to go into the bones as we're doing that rebuild. No, that's a great question. Consistency is great. I just want you to see how your week's going to plan out. And I'll show you kind of a series where I'd like to suggest you have your workout and your diet routine. So great question. So skeleton. It's kind of scary when we see how it starts to shrink. And while we can't stop aging, we can certainly prevent the shrinking, or at least minimize the progression, right? Stand tall, strong muscles for sure. So what do we need? Well, at the ages of 17 to 30, that's when the bone mass is peaking. So if you know any kids, of course even younger than 17, from 5 to 30 Tell them get out and exercise, get out and play. Don't buy them a video game. Just don't buy them a video game the next Christmas. Get them to do something with their bodies. So good. So then our bone mass is maintained pretty well up to age 50, unless what would happen? You're bedridden. What?
Hysterectomy.
Yeah, that could be too. But for sure, if you have lack of activity, change in hormones, and then we need to respond to that by doing plan B. So if you have a period of time where you can't exercise or you have a hormone change, then you talk with your healthcare professional and say, okay, what do I need to do to get back up into where I need to be? Because after age 50, when our hormones do change, now we've got to address that. So whether it happens surgically or it happens naturally, hormones will change for both men and for women. So calcium needs through the ages, we see, it's about 1,000. Now for women, it goes up a little more, again, because the needs change. If you have a hormone decrease that doesn't really help pull the calcium in, we got to push in a little bit more. So exercise a little more and get a little more calcium in. Okay? So when we think of lifestyle issues, what's really going to help and what's going to hinder those bones up to age 50 and then even beyond? So lifestyle choices that we have control over are the most provocative, right? We can't change it if you have to get a hysterectomy because of medical issues, but these we can change. So smoking, alcohol, caffeine, high sodium intake, excessive protein intake, activity, high or low, and of course the one we can't change, which is age, right? So let's talk about it for a minute. How much alcohol is okay? Now, if you have a cancer doctor that said no alcohol is the correct amount, then it's probably not a bad idea to just stay with that. Hopefully, if you are past your treatment and you've learned to go to celebrations without alcohol and you have another drink that you can kind of feel celebratory with, all the power to you. If you feel like you want to be able to have some alcohol but not go over the limit, I think a drink, 4 ounces of wine or 6 ounces of wine a few days a week is great. I think that's acceptable as part of the Mediterranean healthy eating pattern. Now the trick is, can you save up all those that you didn't have last month? Good. I think you knew the answer to that. That would be a no. Yes, because the amount is what causes the problem in the body. So a little bit can kind of go under the wire probably. Every couple of nights, my hubby and I will share a beer. I love a good beer. Or maybe a glass of wine, we'll have a small amount. And so I think that's okay. But you have to find what's going to work for you. And if you feel like, I'm not going to do that much wine. I had one client said, I can't even buy it because if the bottle's there, it's going to be drained. So you know yourself on that. But excess alcohol is a problem. Now with caffeine, a lot of confusion on this one too. I'm a fan of good old black coffee, and we talked about how it's a great ergogenic aid when you want to get out there and work a little harder. So again, excessive amounts is the problem. You'll read some studies that say when we measure caffeine and we measure incidence of cancer, the more caffeine, the more incidence. So that's a parallel relationship. We also see that in studies it doesn't show any correlation. So it's very complicated. What I always tell folks is that when we're looking at your risks and lifestyle, it's really going to be a bank. If you put some benefit in your bank and you take out some risk, where do you end up? And so if your love is alcohol, well, you better make sure you do everything else perfectly, right? Or if your love is caffeine, you better make sure you make everything else really small. So we know that in addition to caffeine and alcohol and even smoking, the next two are really interesting. How much sodium is too much? And that's why I say just don't buy snack foods. Try not to buy packaged foods because invariably they are going to be high in salt. Invariably. So just X off the snack foods. And you think, well, yeah, but my husband or my wife or my kids need chips in the house. No, they do not. And now if you don't have a way to really negotiate around that, then you just make the decision on your own what salty foods you're going to have and which ones you're going to say no to. Protein intake is another really tough one, because when the protein intake is high, we start to see calcium getting pulled from the bones. So calcium is at risk when the protein and the sodium levels are too high. So how much protein do we need? Anybody want to guess? We talked about this a little bit, and I like to say 6 ounces of protein from an animal source a day is plenty. Could you divide that up? Oh yeah, you could have 1 egg in the morning, you could have 2 or 3 ounces of a whole grain at lunch, and then you could have 2 or 3 ounces of chicken at dinner, or maybe some fish, and there you go. That's your protein needs. Doesn't need to be as high as we once thought. And you know, when we watch the stories unfold around Joan and Wendy, they both really encouraged a lot of protein intake. And I see they're thinking, you know, they're doing a lot of strength training, but they're also doing low calorie. And so some of the protein that they're taking in is probably getting broken down and used for energy. So your total calorie intake has a role to play in how much protein you need to be taking. So activity, total calories, and total protein all become part of this equation of building your best menu for strong bones. And then activity. So we know that what kind of activity is going to build strong bones the best? Weight bearing. And I'm even going to say any exercise helps build strong bones, because if you're walking, that is now going against gravity, so that's putting weight bearing. The only two that maybe are a little less weight bearing would be swimming and biking. But let's say that you still have to get to the pool and you have to get out of the pool, right? You can do a little walking there. And of course, biking, you can stand and climb going up hills, and now you've just put some great weight bearing on your lower body. So any exercise is going to count as the win in this regard. So calcium rich foods. We talked a little bit about them in an earlier slide. And so now I want you to jot down and circle and star some of the ones that you don't normally use. And so if you're not able to use dairy, then use a dairy alternative. And here's a fact that I really want to emphasize. Don't take dairy out of your diet thinking that it's a health benefit. We don't need to take dairy out of our diet to be healthier. And so often people will take almond milk thinking that it's a better choice than dairy milk just because it's from almonds instead of from a cow. Nutrition wise, dairy milk is more nutritious. Now, if you have a dairy intolerance, there's a couple of different options. You could take Lactaid. You could have a reduced lactose milk. Anybody know of one? Mootopia, Lactaid. Yeah, there's a bunch on the market now. Green Valley makes a really good low lactose yogurt. So if you have a lactose intolerance, then looking at dairy alternatives would be a great choice. We don't have to skip all the way over to almond milk, right? There's a lot of great choices in between. And when we look for a nutrient-rich beverage, I mean, let's face it, dairy milk is loaded. It's got carbohydrates that are great for us, B vitamins and riboflavin. We've got protein in the dairy. We've got a way to get either no fat at all or some of the good fats. And we, of course, have the vitamin D added to the milk. So it's got a lot of pros, and I don't want us to think that dairy is a choice that we need to take out for health purposes. And then, you know, we talked a little bit about mushrooms. I love the fact that mushrooms are grown in a certain way to help improve the vitamin D levels. Beans, seeds, shellfish, salmon. Has anybody started using salmon out of a can? Yeah? Love it. Weedy, share us a recipe if you think of it, because me too. And at first, I looked at it and I thought, boy, that is some rough looking salmon. But I mixed it in and with some different items, and I love it. So I would.
My grandma always made salmon fried, and I do the version that I make.
Oh, I love it. Salmon patties, yes. And that's how I first learned to use the canned as well.
Do you crush up the bones?
You basically stir them up and they just disintegrate. Yeah, you don't even notice them. And I was at first picking out every little one, and then I realized that there were some still in there, and I thought, wow, is that a celery or a bone? Oh, well, I'll just eat it, you know? And it was great. So,
good in salads and stuff.
yeah, 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 it's really good on salads. So perfect.
Is salmon without bones still a calcium source?
Well, yes, a little bit, and vitamin D. So salmon, any way you look at it, is a great food. But I just think that, you know, at my age, I finally, you know, not finally, I always learn something new, and canned salmon was a huge win for me. And so let's talk a little bit about where you get oxalates. Because there's a lot of talk about avoiding foods that are high in oxalates. And one of the things that we have to kind of think about, Mary, would you mind getting me a towel? I forgot it, thank you. One of the things we want to think about is if you're prone to kidney stones. Anybody prone to kidney stones? Good. Not many people are. I mean, and even if you are, there are still some really great ways to use foods like this that are still great. Thank you so much. If we think of foods that are high in oxalates, it's going to be the same list of foods that are high in nutrients. And so I truly believe that God had a plan there, and that was that we don't need to worry about the oxalates in the food. It's going to bind to some of the calcium, but we also don't need a ton of calcium if we use foods that are in this group of all over healthy. So if you eat foods that are bright greens and beans and tomato products, and even some nuts and avocado, they're not only high in oxalates, but they're also high in the nutrients that we do need. So yeah, there's going to be a little canceling out, but the good news is most of us don't have to worry about it. So, you know you are prone to kidney stones, instead of, I say, throwing out the baby with the bathwater, meaning don't eat any of these foods because you don't want to get kidney stones. Instead, what I'd recommend is occasionally cook, because of course that breaks down some of the oxalates. And of course, you want to drink lots of fluids. And here's another one, is drink lots of fluids with minerals. That helps to pull some of the excess minerals out. So maybe a coconut water that's high in magnesium, mineral water. So that helps your body balance out the oxalates. So foods that are high in calcium tend to have the oxalates as well. There's some that are a little different, but in general, we don't really want to take out those foods because they have so many other good nutrients. And then, of course, you can't go wrong with really pushing your fluids, and helps your kidneys flush out the toxins and the potential uric acid that comes from the oxalates. Okay? I've had several clients that have had kidney stones, and they asked, well, what food should I avoid? And I said, eat lots of fruits and vegetables, eat lots of beans and seeds, and drink a lot of fluids. Maybe cut down on alcohol and caffeine. Yeah. Okay? Excuse me. Okay, so here's our beautiful 85-year-old. Just to remind us, she's 85. Yep. When that picture was taken. Yeah, amazing. So exercise prescription. This is a really fun one. This brings me back to my old personal training days, the FIT principles. So when we think of how do we kind of orchestrate our workouts and our, we're all inspired now and we want to go hit the gym and start really making a difference in our fitness prowess. Well, these 4 sort of acronyms or terms help us to really use that acronym well. And that means to be fit, there's a few principles in mind. We want always to think of moderate to vigorous. So when you think of your rate of perceived exertion, you don't get to stroll. If you have a hike that has some hills and some down, that's fine, but you don't get to stroll. So you right away, part of your FIT principles is it has to be somewhere between moderate and vigorous. And then the start items are frequency. So there's the F. So how often should we do our exercises? So we want weight bearing about 2 days, 3 if you want, And what do I mean by weight bearing? So it doesn't have to be going to a gym and picking up weights. A lot of you do yoga. Using your own body weight is fantastic, which means that you don't have to have equipment. You don't have to have a special place that you go, a gym. It's not a bad idea, though, to have some guidance, because we also don't want to twist a bone. If you have already low bone density, osteopenia, or even frank osteoporosis, you do want to be careful. Twisting and doing a lot of torque on bone could actually be a bad thing. So having some guidance if you're not sure what to do is very wise. But 2 to 3 days, and then make sure you have a rest day in between. Rest day is so good because this is actually when your bone gets stronger. Your bone is not getting stronger when you're in your yoga class. Your bone is being taxed. It's doing the, oh wow, that's hard. I think I better strain and struggle because I can't quite do that. That's the moderate to vigorous. The next day when you're resting, that's when your body is rebuilding so that the next time you do it, you're more equipped. And then of course you have to make it harder again. Like, oh really? Yes, absolutely. Sure. Just not doing the same exercise all over and over, and not allowing your body to rest. And as we age, we do need that rest day even more, because it takes us a little more time to do that recovery process. And that's again because our hormone systems aren't quite as robust. They're still there, they're just not quite as ready for action. So, frequency. The next one is intensity. So I talked about intensity with RPE, rate of perceived exertion. And I think I told you I like RPEs a lot more than sets and reps, because I want you to really be aware of how hard you're working. You should not be thinking about what you're going to have for dinner while you're doing your bicep curls, or a conversation with your loved one you had early that day. You should be all focused in on that work, thinking about how your muscles are being taxed and what your position or your form is looking. All of those need to be front and center in that activity. But intensity should go to fatigue. So when you finish whatever set you're doing, it should be, wow, I'm glad that's over. And if you watch Joan, if you watched any of her videos, she's out of breath after her sets, and she can't wait to take her recovery and get a drink of water. And so taking the hydration all the time, having that rest period in between your sets is really good. A lot of experts say that you don't really need to do 2 and 3 sets or even 4. You could even just do 1, especially when you're brand new. Here what I've done is under time, 2 to 3 sets is ideal. Mainly what you want to do though is just hit all major muscle groups and go to fatigue. So if you are short on time, you could do a 30-minute workout and you could get all muscle groups, and you can work really hard and get your 1 set done, and you don't have to go and repeat it. So again, using your rate of perceived exertion is a really good way to just cross-check yourself. And sometimes people prefer to have a really set routine. We watched Joan, the way she tracked everything. And remember, she was really admitting that one of the toughest challenges for her was to learn how to do all of the data entry and all the technology. So whatever system you use, having a way to look back on your progress is so good. Which leads me to say, if you've never done a bone density, which I'm sure all of us, we probably have, and know that after our hormones change, the bones change much more rapid. So knowing that you've got your work cut out for you and making sure that you have your routine set, so that when you do a cross-check and you look back on your journaling and then you get another bone density measurement, you can see, okay, am I doing enough? Am I able to really minimize the loss of my bone? Maybe even bring that bone back, which again is super exciting that we probably can do that. And then type. So type is really important, especially when you're first starting out. Starting with stability exercises, core strengthening is so key, because once your balance is in check, which we know is all about core stability, now you could do a more upper body. So if you feel like your balance is at risk, we want to always protect against injury. So having something to stabilize, even if it's some balance stick, Sometimes I see hikers and they have these big walking sticks, and I seriously did not know what that was for until someone said, well, if their balance is in question or in jeopardy, that helps them from falling. But I wouldn't want to always rely on that, because now you're not asking your core to get stronger. And just standing on one leg and pulling in your tummy and thinking about, okay, when I take that lever out of my stance, what has to kick in instead? So I have all the work happening in my core, in my back, and my shoulders, and lifting up through the center line. If you've never taken a Pilates class, it's so great because they really talk about what dancers do, and that is to lift the center line. They always want to be taller, they always want to be long, and so when you have that visual, it really helps with your balance. And so the type could be not only focusing on one body area, but also a style. So whether it be yoga or Pilates or different kinds of strength training exercises that have you do circuit work or functional training, there's lots of fun terms. But what you want to make sure you do is get full body attention, always starting with balance. And I love that, Miss Joan is showing us this exercise where she's got a full body engagement here. Her arms are overhead. She's really doing a stretch, but is she also doing balance? Yep. Is she also doing lower body? Yep. And she's even doing arms, because she's really engaging every muscle. And I love exercises like that where you are using multiple body parts in one activity. So it's helping you in your overload principle, meaning that you're fatiguing your body beautifully because you're doing lots of big movements. And so the most bang for your buck. And you're really getting every piece of the puzzle engaged. Very important to breathe through the exercises. This is something that weight trainers would sometimes do, and they would get dizzy. And when I worked at Lifetime Fitness, I saw this because they would hold their breath. And of course, that's dangerous on all kinds of fronts. But allowing the breathing to really stay open also is working your intercostal muscles, which are the muscles right around the rib cage, and helping you to stay really strong. But also, we've got to have oxygen going to the brain, otherwise balance is all over, right? And then form, I mentioned, as well as those machines that really help with the form. And I left One Star open because I wanted to hear if you had any other things that you felt like, gosh, this is really important to me when I do my repetitions and I'm doing my workout. And I think if it were me, I would say I'd want to do a warm-up, and that's got to be present as a very formal initial step, because your warm-up is going to help you really get your mind focused on what you're doing. Okay? So load-bearing resistance. So I mentioned this a little bit, 30 minutes a day at least. And again, you don't want to be a clock watcher. Because if you're a clock watcher, your heart's not in the game. And if you feel like you're there, oh man, I'm just not in the heart of it today. Either do something totally different or just leave and come back later. Because you don't want to risk injury, and you also don't want to have a bad taste in your mouth of fitness. Like, oh, I hate this, but I'm going to white knuckle it. And really having a buddy makes that so much better. If you don't feel like going, but you've got a buddy that inspires you and keeps you company and really helps make it an engaging activity, it's so much better. You had a question?
So if this is 30 minutes a day, what about the weight bearing only 2 to 3 times a day?
Yes, exactly. Great question. Let's talk about that, because we don't have to do the same thing every day. So weight bearing with a formal load bearing principle is going to be, say, on your Monday and your Thursday. And just like Shirley said, well, in between, can I do something different? Well, heck yeah. You could have one day that focuses mainly on stretching. Tai Chi mainly focuses on balance. So now you've got your whole week mapped out in a really nice cross-training emphasis. It's giving you interest and intrigue. You get to have different coach maybe, or a different location. And so the secret is you're still getting a little weight bearing, but it's not focused overload principle with a design of really fatiguing that muscle. Does that answer your question?
Okay.
So what about like if you were like, say, walking, the ankles, the wrist weights, like if you alternated those?
Yeah, I actually don't recommend that. I don't recommend walking
Okay.
with weights. That's a
Okay.
really great question. What I'd rather you do is work on your time and intensity of the walk, meaning you're going to walk that same 2 miles with a less time, and that's going to force your intensity to go up. That's a better way to train. And then save your weight bearing for a different day. So use those weights on your legs by doing, 2 pounds strapped on your legs and do leg extension.
I have 2 Labradors.
Got you.
I do a mile and a half of them every day.
Oh, that's amazing. I love it. Dogs are wonderful, but they can definitely impede on your formal workout, right? I feel the
already got
same
damage
way.
on my arm.
Yeah. So sometimes leave them at home and say, sorry, honeys, but this one's for me. So if we think of our workout week, you want to have 1 or 2 days in the beginning where you really focus on strength training. So your routine's going to look different. Because remember, for really to help our bones, we need to have a formal resistance day. And, we might do the next one here, or as long as we have a rest day of those muscles, that's okay. We can go to a different muscle group. So strength train, rest those muscles. And now maybe here we're going to do our strength day again. Number 2. And then down here you might do a yoga class, which again, those of you that have taken yoga, it can be hard. It can still be challenging your muscles. So you'll have to decide, if I'm going to do lower body today, I'm going to pick a yoga class that's going to do more chaturangas, the upper body. Let your lower body take a break. There's so many wonderful flows in yoga that have different focus. If you hold warrior position and triangle pose long enough, it's going to feel like a strength. But the nice thing is it's really helping to stretch, and it's helping to focus as well on your joints. A little bit of strength too. And another thing I love about this one is it helps you to really focus on your heart. There's a whole connection of letting your body feel at ease, breathing more, and focusing on letting the stress leave our internal organs. I love when we learned how to do a belly breath. And, for sure, I'm always thinking of tight core, but in yoga, you get to just have a soft belly. You just get to relax and let it be soft. And so that helps to distribute and alleviate tension in your body, which is so good for our immune system. So it's a whole different style of exercise that's just as important as anything else. And then you might have another day where you just really work on endurance. So if you love to swim, this would be the day where you could swim, because now you're not worried so much about getting your overload principle for your quadriceps, because you want to build your hip bones. You're not worried so much about, all of the other muscles. You just get to breathe big, breathe hard, get lots of muscle engagement, and start activating your heart.
Would walking fall into the endurance?
Yes. So anything that we do is going to be so subjective, because we know we have to have overload. So at some point, it has to be enough for you to breathe big. So overload means it's not just a walk in the park. Even if at the end of your stroll, because you're with your girlfriends and you're enjoying and you're walking, at some point in the walk you go, okay, we're going to do everything we can to get up to that hill. We're not going to talk, and we're going to walk fast for 2 minutes. Those little peaks and valleys in your walk are fantastic. That changes the fuel utilization. All of a sudden you shift and start pushing your ceiling up, we call it, which means your body goes, oh, I'm going to have to work a little harder now. And so all the mitochondria start doing more aerobic generation, which is
So is it okay? Because in my neighborhood, I have all kinds of hills, and I've been doing this now for almost 30 years, and I feel like I should be used to this walk right now. When you go up those little, and it still seems like every day it's oh my gosh.
That's why I feel like a journal will help you so much,
Okay.
because it is easier. It might not feel like it because it's gradual, but I can almost guarantee you that your body is able to do it better now than it was 2 years ago.
Well, yes, because I would just stop.
Yeah, if you stop, well then you sometimes feel like you're
Yeah, I would
starting
just go
over.
the other way, but no, now I get through it, but it's I did a bone density test, and so my doctor told me to take, because I have the beginning stages of like the osteoporosis, to take the citrical. So, but if you incorporate all of this along with those foods, there's no need for all for that, right?
Well, and that's where, there's some gray area. There's always risks and benefits to taking supplements. And so you just really want to watch that. And that's really perfect for the next slide. I'll take your question in just a second. When diet and exercise are not enough. And so doing your bone density, doing your purposeful lifestyle adjustments, and then getting another one done. Because remember, we can't take a calcium level. Calcium test is not going to tell you. It's completely not going to give you the true story. The bone density will. So if we get it done again and we realize that the lumbar spine is not a plus, but it's now a negative, we're not seeing enough improvement in your bone mineral density, then we have to go to something else. But risks may still outweigh the potential benefits of taking some of these medicines. If you have other conditions, so in the fine print, what I included here was this certain drug called Evenity. Serious side effects, including risk of having heart attack, stroke, cardiovascular disease, and it also, I cut it off a little bit of it there, but GI upset, and so we have to be really careful. But you want to be able to have the conversation with your doctor and decide, should I start with a calcium supplement? And if so, let's decide which one. Calcium citrate plus vitamin D, perhaps the K2, are all really important, and then add diet. If you take a supplement, small amounts with food throughout the day, and see if that combination is what you're looking for. But all these medicines are coming up now and showing hope, but there's side effects, and so we just got to be careful. We know that, is it the best one for you? And so when we think of how do we get 1,000 milligrams or even 1,200 milligrams with our 30 minutes of exercise? And so I put this one down because, we probably don't eat sardines very often. Yay! I love it, Miss Shirley. I started to too. My husband loves them. And he felt so proud. He's opening his can, and I'm like, oh, lovely, honey. But then I ate one with a piece of our gluten-free sourdough bread, and it was actually quite good. And it makes me think of Charles Butt, because I don't know if I told you this, but when I worked for HEB, that's what we had in common, is that we would share stories about, my son loves sardines, so we would share recipes. So it's really just getting in the habit of pulling these foods up that can help us. And remember that healthy gut biome also improves the absorption of these important minerals, of vitamin D and calcium, when your gut biome is healthy. So even if you go, look, Suzanne, I'm just not eating sardines, that's okay. What we then want to do is look at other things and other ways to get your absorption maximized. And so cheddar cheese, and I've often said cheese is not your friend. Of course, it's a rock star with calcium. And so if you can eat a small amount of cheese, you're okay. If you're like, sorry, but once that cheddar cheese is open, I'm at it every day. I can't leave it alone. Well, okay, so maybe for you, we got to try something different. But there's that milk again. Soybeans are also a rock star. Leafy greens, broccoli, even baked beans. And so it's nice to see. And there's plenty of packaged foods that claim calcium is added. And what's the risk there? Well, along with the calcium, are you getting high sodium and high other stuff? So, there's some foods out there that are going to be great. Calcium's added, and they haven't added a bunch of other stuff. So those are the ones we look for. And so in the final slide, I just wanted to help us again feel inspired that there's so many ways to have fun with your bodies. And if you've never taken a dance class, or if you've never taken a yoga class on the ball, and I know you guys have, because I'm going to guess all of you have taken some of the really fun classes, but do something different. So if you feel like you're walking in the same path and you're either bored with it, or you feel like, gosh, maybe I'm not getting enough, that's when you get to try something different and then have fun with it, because for sure it's going to challenge your balance to do a new activity. It's going to challenge all kinds of range of motion that will then make it really fun. And again, whenever you can have a walking buddy, that's the trick. At my church, I started we have small groups in our church, and I started a walking group, and everybody thought that was so odd. Instead of having it, with open hand in the house, we wanted to be out on the trail. But I mean, what Socrates does walk and talk, back in the day. So for me, I think the best when I'm moving, and it's been so much fun to get different ages involved in my walking group, because now we can, do something we love that has twofold. We get to walk and get to share fellowship. So yeah. Okay. So thank you so much. And I'd love to get some of your questions at this point.
What are your thoughts when we're doing the workouts, like doing 2 in one day? I'll give you a good example. So I'll do sometimes strength training in the morning, and then I also go to my yoga.
Yeah. So the question is, can we do 2 exercises in a day? And I say absolutely. Are you going to get the same benefit as if you did your one on Wednesday and the other on Thursday? It depends, because always we think about the overload principle. So did you challenge your body enough, and did you have enough rest time? And so there's a lot of interesting studies out there that some ladies and guys, but it seems like ladies were always, overkill. Some folks overtrain, and that does not help their bones ever get stronger.
And then usually I'll add something that's like strength training, and then either walking or the yoga.
There you go. So you do 2 different things. So strength training and then yoga. Yes, I love it. So let's get out and exercise and have some fun. Thank you so much.